Hello, buddy. Welcome back to the Tin Man's Corner channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor, and today I'll be reacting to 8 most disturbing things discovered in the forest. Now, this is my final Chillin' Scares video of this marathon, and judging by the title alone, I said it makes you wonder what they're going to find. Well, let me turn the lights off, move you guys up to the computer screen, and let's find out together, all right?
James Schoeffler was a U.S. Forest Service officer in Utah. In April of 2012, he was conducting a routine patrol of a popular scenic hiking trail deep in the forest.
Right.
He was about halfway through his walk when he noticed a tripwire strung between 2 trees at the entrance of a small deadwood shelter along the trail. He followed the wire and was led to a ball made of rocks and sharpened sticks hanging in the air, which was set to fall when the tripwire was hit.
I was just thinking it's either a alarm tripwire, like you trip the wire and then a silent alarm goes off somewhere, or an actual bell, and then whoever's in the area would hear and be like, somebody's coming. But no. If you found that in the woods, I mean, somebody's planning on either capturing big game with that spiky contraption or planning on murdering somebody, because that sure does look like it could just knock somebody's head off like that.
Further inspection, another trap was found at a second entrance to the small shelter. This one was a bed of sharpened sticks placed facing upward in the ground. Again, a tripwire was set in front of it, which this time was pulled tight and would have forced a person to fall directly into the sticks. Police were called and informed of the dangerous and potentially deadly traps.
I'm glad you called the cops on
Soon
that.
They would begin conducting interviews of hikers in the area within the last few days. And surprisingly, this would lead them to 2 teenagers. They would confess to setting them up. However, they argued the traps were set for animals. Police would not buy this. The nature of the traps was clearly made for a person. Plus, they were set way too close to a popular hiking trail that receives a lot of traffic. More specifically, at the entrances to a small shelter, which easily would have attracted a curious child or unsuspecting tourist. In 2017, Ivan...
Hold on, before he continues on with this one. I don't know what is going on with them kids' minds denying that it was just for game. Are you kidding me? That doesn't look like nothing for game.
A 30-year-old man from Russia abruptly went missing on a solo hike in the Shatura district of Moscow. When he initially didn't come back, his family reported his absence to the police, and a search of the surrounding woods later commenced. But no results came from this search, and it was eventually called off with no findings whatsoever.
None?
Fast forward 2 years later to 2019, and a hiker in the same area called in to report the found remains of a human skeleton halfway buried under leaves.
Oh.
This human skeleton was later confirmed to be of Ivan. What makes the finding so disturbing, though, is what was found with the skeleton. Tied to the remains and nearby trees were multiple sets of handcuffs, locks, and chains. Ivan's tent was found close to the scene, leading police to believe he was attempting an isolated Houdini-type escape, chaining himself up and trying to free himself without any help, and that this ultimately went horribly wrong.
Now, why would he do that, huh? That don't sound like no Houdini trick gone haywire. That looks more like maybe possible murder. But I don't know why they would need to handcuff them all up like that, which is weird.
One of his friends even later stated that this type of stunt was something he could see Ivan doing, as he would often practice survival skills in extreme conditions. But others believe Ivan was murdered, and that the crime scene was simply set up after the fact so that it would look like it was a tragic accident. Ivan's official cause of death hasn't been determined.
Oh, man. Feel sorry about that, but yeah, somebody must have figured out he loved doing that type of stuff, and they just set it all up to make it look like he was trying to do a strange escape from a lot of locks, but I don't buy it. It must be murder. But then yet, you can't find a murderer or no fingerprints or nothing around that stuff. But if you do, it probably Ivan's. But anyway, this baffles me.
It's May of 2016. A man is walking a private forest trail in Harlan County in Kentucky. Suddenly, he sees something on the ground just slightly off the trail path. He gets closer and sees it's a trail camera. Trail cameras are waterproof outdoor cameras that are typically motion activated, with the purpose being to record wildlife.
Right.
Most of them even have night vision capabilities. They're a somewhat common sight in the forest, so the man didn't give much thought to the discovery. Although this camera didn't have any memory card or batteries inside. It looked like it was abandoned, so the man decided to take it with him. Later, the man recalls giving the camera to a friend. When his friend put batteries in the camera, an explosion immediately went off inside of it.
Oh!
The trail camera was rigged with explosives that were set to go off the second batteries were installed. The explosion was large enough to blow off some of the man's fingers and cause injury to his stomach.
Ugh.
Police launched an investigation and found another camera on the trail rigged to explode. Eventually, the cameras were traced back to a man named Mark Sawaf, who was immediately identified as a suspect. Police were granted a search warrant to his home, and there they found all the equipment used to create the explosives, along with a note that read, "Broken camera for a broken soul." Mark was taken into custody. Meanwhile, more reports of exploding cameras around the area were coming in. In response, police would take Mark back out into the forest and have him detail the locations of the remaining live explosive devices. But while in the forest with police, Mark would lunge at one of the officers' pistols in a last-ditch effort to get away. The physical altercation would result in Mark being fatally shot. Mark never revealed where his remaining trail cameras were before his death, although police believe there are numerous others within a 5-mile radius of those Kentucky woods.
Makes you wonder, why would somebody do that? A broken camera for a broken soul? And plus, that guy didn't even know it was booby trapped, so if he put batteries in the camera, then he would have lost his fingers. These sickos out here, they could just put any type of bomb in any everyday item nowadays. Like, they don't care who grabs it. I mean, imagine if a kid got it and put batteries in it. Kaboom. Ooh. Man, I hate this, huh? But I know he's going to meet his maker since he tried to attack an officer. But I hope they do find them other camera explosives.
All of which just waiting to be discovered by some unfortunate person. In July of 1968, a group of women were at a picnic table near their lake house at Lake Michigan. They were playing cards together and having a good time when they were interrupted by an overbearing stench. It got so bad that the women began struggling to breathe, forcing them to cut their game short. They assumed a dead animal must have been nearby, and not knowing what else to do, they alerted their cabin's caretaker, Chauncey Bliss. Chauncey headed out to those woods, but instead of finding a dead animal, he followed the stench to another cabin he oversaw around half a mile away. He forced himself through the horrible odor closer towards the front door, but he quickly realized something was wrong. He noticed holes in the glass of the windows. He glanced inside one of them and saw a woman's remains lying on the floor.
Oh, heck no.
Behind her, he got a glimpse of several others in the same manner. Horrified, Chauncey ran away and called the police. Police arrived at the scene, and a total of 6 bodies were discovered. It was every member of the Robeson family. No one had seen them in weeks, but the family had told others they were planning on a trip out of town, therefore no one questioned it. Police concluded that they had been killed at least a month earlier. Investigations into who could have done this didn't turn up much. There wasn't much evidence at the scene, and the family didn't have any known enemies. The most prominent suspect was an employee of Mr. Robeson, but this man would never be tried in court. Over 50 years later, it's still unknown who's responsible for the Robeson family murders.
Oh, that's bull. Yeah, look at this map. The wife is right here. Okay? Then someone named Gary and Junior is right there. And the rest of the family members were dragged from these locations into the hallway. Dang, I wish they found the killer. Because imagine you killed a man and his whole entire family. I can't think of. There's another case similar to it, but it was a dad that was involved. But in this case, the dad is dead, so it can't be anybody else unless it was, like they said, the employee.
Matt Bell and a coworker were doing excavation work in the woods of Danville, Arkansas, when they came across a 32-pound old round ball in the ground. Matt thought it was an old cannonball from the Civil War and decided to take it home with him. The thing was dirty, and so he pressure washed the ball to try and clean it up a bit. While he was drying it on his counter, he snapped some pictures of it. The next day, he went to a Civil War museum to verify the object's authenticity. This is where he was informed that it wasn't a cannonball at all, rather a Civil War-era pressure-activated landmine that was still active.
Oh, crud.
Matt was forced to take the explosive back home, where he called police. 20 homes in the nearby area were evacuated, and
Man, if he'd known it was a landmine, he could have just left it out there in the woods and let them guys go take care of it. But, well, of course he didn't know, and they had to bring in a whole bomb squad just to evacuate the whole area. It did look like a cannonball, but I didn't know landmines were built to almost look like cannonballs back in them days. But anyway, let's continue.
a bomb squad was called in. The explosive was carefully taken to a landfill where it was safely set off.
Good.
Matt recalls his coworkers throwing the mine to him out of a ditch when they first found it. That, along with multiple car rides and being pressure washed, Matt is extremely lucky the landmine didn't explode on him.
I know, he should be lucky. But yeah, I wouldn't have known either. It would look like a cannonball to me, but I'll call the cops to see if they can examine it and be like, if it's a landmine, step away and detonate the sucker. Without nobody getting hurt, of course.
In July of 2016, a construction worker was doing routine maintenance on the right lane of a section of road on Interstate 985 located in Georgia. At one point during his shift, the man had to relieve himself, and so he started walking into the forest just next to him. He got about 80 yards in when he noticed a large object on the ground. As he got closer, he realized it was a suitcase. Curious, he zipped it open. Inside, he saw a human skull. Immediately, the man ran back to the highway and told his supervisor, who then told the police. When they arrived, the man showed them to the suitcase. A full set of bones were discovered along with the skull. Later analysis would reveal them to be of a woman, most likely in her 20s or 30s at the time of death. It's assumed she died around 6 months before the discovery. Fast forward to 2019, and police now believe they've identified the woman as Jessica Mancini from Chattanooga, Tennessee. She was originally reported missing by her mother back before the suitcase's discovery. However, how she died, or who was responsible, are both still unknown to this day.
Really? You mean to tell me that there ain't no fingerprints on the suitcase? Well, if it's been in the woods for a long time, it might have been washed away from rain and snow and other stuff. But, well, I'm glad they found out who it was so they can, alert the family, even though it's a sad discovery.
In 1986, 19-year-old Christopher Knight vanished from his home in Maine to live in the woods for no apparent reason. For food, Christopher would steal from dozens of different cottages and camps around the area.
Which I just found out about that guy in the other Chillin' Scares video I was reacting to. In the Urban Legends video. People thought that he was like a legendary hermit.
During his break-ins, he would also take things like clothing, camping gear, propane tanks, batteries, and other stuff. People in the area were quickly made aware of his presence. Some even started intentionally setting out supplies for the guy just so he wouldn't break into their homes during the night. But even though his means of living were pretty well known in the area, if one thing was certain, he did not want to be found. Christopher went to extreme lengths to cover his tracks. For example, he would opt to never start a fire so that the smoke wouldn't reveal his camp's position in the woods. Winters would get extremely cold at around 10 degrees Fahrenheit, but still Christopher didn't start a fire, instead opting to cover himself in multiple sleeping bags. But as the years passed and security cameras became more common, Christopher's break-ins would eventually start showing up on security camera footage. Finally, 27 years after he left his home in Maine, he unknowingly tripped a surveillance sensor while routinely stealing food from a camp. Police were alerted and showed up to the scene. Christopher was still there, and the first human contact he had in years would be him being arrested. Police had finally found and caught the man responsible for thousands of burglaries in the area. Eventually, Christopher would show police his camp. It was filled with decades worth of stolen goods. Christopher was ultimately given 7 months in jail and 3 years probation. It's April 26th, 2021. The police department in Anchorage, Alaska receive a disturbing phone call. The caller reports a freezer in the forest, found buried halfway into the ground. Inside of it, a body. Police rush out to the scene and from the highway are led deep into the woods where the freezer was once again located.
Why would somebody throw a freezer out in the woods in the snow, and then, if it had a dead body in it, why would you throw it out there to begin with? If it had a dead body, somebody would have just, tried to cremate it in a fire or bury it. But no. Well, for one thing, I am glad that the body was found, though, so they could get authorities out there to look at it.
They opened it and were able to confirm the caller's claims. A few months later, police released more information about the finding. The man inside the freezer was 67-year-old Michael Tiefteller, who had lived nearby. Police were unable to identify how he was killed. It's also unknown when he was killed. He lived an isolated life. The last time he was known to be alive was 3 years prior in 2018, so really it could have been anywhere in that time frame. Whoever did this hasn't been found, and with nothing to go off of, this case was classified as cold, essentially from the beginning.
First off, let me just say about that Christopher Knight fellow. I'm glad that the authorities did not, pressure him too much and gave him a lighter sentence for doing what he was doing. But then it's sad to just think about you find an elderly guy in a freezer out in the middle of nowhere in Alaska in the snow. Nobody didn't report him missing or anything. But it's just sad to think you just find that out in the woods. Oof. So from now on, I'm going to be cautious when I enter the woods around my property or just anywhere like in a national park or something. Because you never know, some idiot out there will probably put a tripwire for you to fall on spikes or something like in the first one, or trail cameras. Open them up and see if they got batteries already in them, because if they don't, it's explosives wired to when you put batteries in them to explode. You never know what sicko out there is planning or scheming what they're going to do in the woods. But anyway, that's going to be it for now. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and let me know down in the comments if you guys ever been into the woods and you found anything suspicious. This has been another successful installment of the Tin Man's Corner channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor. I say that's a wrap, and have a nice day, buddy.